In the unforgiving mountains of Eastern Europe, where the sound of gunfire echoes through valleys like thunder, there lived a truth that most soldiers refused to acknowledge. They believed that war was a man's domain, that precision shooting required strength only men possessed, and that a woman's place was anywhere but behind a sniper rifle. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. What happened on that foggy morning in October would become legend among military circles, a story whispered in barracks, analyzed in tactical schools, and remembered long after the last shot was fired. It began with cruel laughter and ended with stunned silence. 5 shots, 5 targets. 5 perfect kills that would redefine everything these battle-hardened soldiers thought they knew about warfare. This is the true story of Elena Volkov, the woman who proved that the deadliest weapon on any battlefield isn't always the biggest gun. Sometimes it's the quiet determination of someone who refuses to be underestimated. Elena Volkov stood at the edge of the military compound, her weathered hands gripping the chain-link fence as she watched the soldiers practice their marksmanship. The autumn wind whipped through her dark hair, carrying with it the acrid smell of gunpowder and the distant sound of automatic weapons fire. At 28, she had spent more years learning the art of precision shooting than most of these men had spent in the military. Yet none of them knew her name. She had grown up in the remote villages of the Carpathian Mountains, where her grandfather taught her to hunt wild boar with nothing but an old hunting rifle and iron determination. By the age of 12, she could hit a moving target at 300 meters. By 16, she was providing meat for 3 neighboring families during the harsh winters when food was scarce. Her grandfather, a veteran of countless conflicts, recognized something special in her steady hands and calculating mind. "Elena," he would say as they tracked deer through the dense forest, "shooting is not about strength. It is about patience, breathing, and understanding the rhythm of your own heartbeat. A true marksman becomes one with their weapon, feeling the wind, reading the landscape, predicting movement before it happens." These lessons shaped her into something extraordinary. While other young women her age worried about fashion and relationships, Elena studied ballistics, wind patterns, and the subtle art of camouflage. She learned to remain motionless for hours, to control her breathing so precisely that her rifle barrel never wavered, and to calculate distance and wind drift in her head faster than most people could use a calculator. When civil unrest erupted in her region, Elena watched helplessly as armed groups terrorized local villages. Her own community was attacked twice, leaving several families homeless and afraid. The local authorities seemed powerless against the well-armed militias that roamed the countryside. It was during this time that Elena made a decision that would change her life forever. She approached Captain Dmitry Kozlov, the commanding officer of a special forces unit that had been deployed to restore order in the region. Captain Kozlov was a gruff, experienced soldier who had served in multiple combat zones. His unit was known for their effectiveness, but they were struggling with the mountainous terrain and the enemy's knowledge of local hiding spots. "I want to join your unit," Elena told him directly, standing in his temporary field office with the confidence of someone who had never doubted their own abilities. Captain Kozlov looked up from his maps, his weathered face showing a mixture of surprise and amusement. He took in her civilian clothes, her slight build, and her determined expression before breaking into a rough laugh. "Little girl, this is not a game," he said, his voice carrying the patronizing tone that Elena had heard countless times before. "War is not a place for women. Go home to your family and let the real soldiers handle this situation." Elena remained perfectly still, her green eyes fixed on the captain's face. "I can outshoot any man in your unit," she said quietly. "Give me a chance to prove it." The captain's laughter died as he studied her serious expression. Around the office, several soldiers had stopped their work to listen to the conversation. Staff Sergeant Viktor Petrov, a stocky man with scarred hands and a reputation for cruelty, spoke up from his corner desk. "Captain, this is ridiculous. We cannot have civilians playing soldier, especially not some village girl who thinks she knows how to handle a weapon. Send her away before she gets herself or one of us killed." Sergeant Major Alexei Volgin, a tall man with cold blue eyes and 20 years of military experience, nodded in agreement. "Petrov is right. We have serious work to do here." We cannot waste time babysitting someone who watched too many action movies and thinks she can be a soldier. Elena felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but she had faced this skepticism her entire life. Instead of arguing, she reached into her backpack and pulled out a photograph. It showed her standing next to a large brown bear that she had brought down with a single shot to the head at nearly 400 meters. This bear had been terrorizing a village for 3 weeks, she said, placing the photograph on the captain's desk. The local police tried to stop it with multiple officers and automatic weapons. They failed. I tracked it for 2 days through dense forest and took it down with one shot through the eye socket at a distance your best marksman probably could not manage with perfect conditions. Captain Kozlov examined the photograph carefully. The bear was enormous, and the precision of the shot was undeniable. He had seen many hunters over the years, and most would have simply aimed for the largest target area on such a dangerous animal. To deliberately choose such a small target required exceptional skill and confidence. Even if this is real, Sergeant Major Volgan interjected, hunting animals is completely different from combat situations. Animals do not shoot back. They do not use tactics or take cover. A lucky shot on a bear does not make someone a sniper. Elena reached into her backpack again and produced a folder containing several more photographs and documents. There were pictures of her at various shooting competitions, certificates from marksmanship contests she had won, and testimonials from local law enforcement who had worked with her during emergency situations. Last year, I assisted the regional police during a hostage situation, she said, opening the folder to reveal official documentation. 3 armed criminals had taken a family captive in their farmhouse. The police surrounded the building but could not get a clear shot without endangering the hostages. I positioned myself on a hill 600 meters away and eliminated all 3 threats with 3 shots in under 10 seconds. The family was rescued without injury. The room fell silent as Captain Kozlov examined the official police reports. The documentation was legitimate, complete with witness statements and commendations from senior law enforcement officials. The precision and speed described in the reports was extraordinary, even by military standards. Staff Sergeant Petrov stood up from his desk, his face flushed with irritation. Captain, with all due respect, we cannot make decisions based on some local police paperwork. Anyone can fabricate documents. This woman is wasting our time with fairy tales and photoshopped pictures. I agree, said Lieutenant Boris Semenov, a young officer who had been quietly observing the conversation. We have real missions to complete. Our unit has a reputation for excellence, and we cannot compromise that reputation by allowing unqualified personnel to join our operations, regardless of their gender. Elena could see that despite the evidence she had presented, the men in the room were not willing to consider her seriously. She understood their skepticism from a logical standpoint. She was an outsider, a civilian and a woman in a field dominated by men. However, she also knew that their dismissal was based more on prejudice than on rational evaluation of her abilities. Captain Kozlov closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. He had commanded men in combat for over 15 years, and his survival had depended on his ability to accurately assess people and situations. Something about Elena's quiet confidence reminded him of the best soldiers he had served with, those who spoke little but delivered results when it mattered most. Tell me, he said slowly, why should I risk my unit's safety and effectiveness by bringing in someone with no military training, no understanding of combat tactics, and no experience working as part of a team? Elena had anticipated this question and had her answer ready. Because your current approach is not working, Captain. Your unit has been in this region for 6 weeks, and the enemy continues to evade your patrols. They know these mountains better than your soldiers do, and they are using that knowledge to stay ahead of your movements. You need someone who understands this terrain, who can think like they do, and who can take shots that your current marksman cannot make. She paused and looked directly into the captain's eyes. You need someone who can get results regardless of what package those results come in. Give me one chance to prove my value. 1 mission, 1 target, 1 shot. If I fail to deliver exactly what I promise, I will leave and never bother your unit again. The soldiers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief at her boldness. Sergeant Major Volgan stepped forward, his voice firm and dismissive. Captain, this conversation has gone far enough. We have protocols and standards for a reason. We cannot set a precedent of allowing civilians to participate in military operations based on unverified claims and amateur photographs. Staff Sergeant Petrov nodded vigorously. Volgin is absolutely right. Our unit has trained together, bled together, and survived together because we know we can depend on each other. Bringing in an outsider, especially someone with no military experience, could get people killed. Elena listened to their objections without emotion, understanding that their resistance came from both professional concerns and personal biases. She had faced similar reactions her entire life, from hunting guides who refused to take her seriously to shooting instructors who assumed she was wasting their time. In every case, she had overcome their skepticism through demonstration, rather than argument. Captain Kozlov studied Elena's face for a long moment, weighing the potential risks against the possible benefits. His unit was indeed struggling with the challenging terrain and elusive enemy. Their standard military tactics were proving less effective than hoped in this specific environment. Perhaps an unconventional approach was worth considering. Finally, he stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the training grounds where his soldiers were practicing their marksmanship. After several minutes of contemplation, he turned back to Elena with a decision that would change everything. "Tomorrow morning at dawn," he said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command, "you will demonstrate your abilities under combat conditions. If you can prove that you possess the skills you claim, we will discuss the possibility of limited cooperation. If you fail to meet our standards, you will leave this base immediately and never return." Elena nodded once, her expression unchanging. "What will be the nature of the test?" 5 targets at varying distances and conditions," Captain Kozlov replied. "You will have 1 shot per target. No adjustments, no second chances. The targets will be positioned in realistic combat scenarios, and you will be required to engage them within a specific time frame." Sergeant Major Volgin protested immediately. "Captain, this is highly irregular. We should not be—" "The decision is made," Captain Kozlov said firmly, cutting off the objection. "Prepare the targets according to standard sniper evaluation protocols. Tomorrow, we will see if this woman can back up her claims with performance." As Elena prepared to leave the office, Staff Sergeant Petrov called out to her with obvious mockery in his voice. "I hope you have said goodbye to your family, little girl. Tomorrow you will learn the difference between shooting helpless animals and performing under real pressure. Do not be too disappointed when you discover that military precision requires more than village tricks and beginner's luck." Elena turned back to face him, her green eyes steady and calm. "Sergeant, I appreciate your concern for my feelings. Tomorrow, I will do my best not to embarrass your unit with my village tricks." She left the office quietly, already beginning to prepare mentally for the challenge ahead. Outside, she could hear some of the soldiers discussing her visit with amusement and disbelief. She understood their reactions, having encountered similar attitudes throughout her life. However, she also knew that tomorrow would provide her with the opportunity she had been waiting for. The chance to prove that skill, determination, and preparation matter more than assumptions and prejudices. That evening, Elena sat alone in her modest hotel room, methodically cleaning and inspecting her rifle. The weapon was a custom-modified hunting rifle that her grandfather had left to her, upgraded with precision components that she had acquired over years of competition shooting. Every part of the rifle had been carefully selected and adjusted to her specific requirements, creating a weapon system that was perfectly suited to her style and capabilities. As she worked, Elena thought about her grandfather's teachings and the long path that had brought her to this moment. Tomorrow would determine whether years of training and sacrifice would finally be recognized, or whether she would be dismissed once again as just another dreamer who did not understand her place in the world. Either way, she was ready to show these soldiers exactly what a woman from the mountains could accomplish when given the chance to prove herself. Dawn broke gray and cold over the military compound, with a thick fog rolling down from the mountains that would make the shooting test even more challenging. Elena arrived at the designated area 30 minutes before the scheduled time, carrying her rifle case and a small bag of equipment. She had spent the night studying weather reports and calculating how the morning conditions would affect bullet trajectory and visibility. Captain Kozlov was already present, along with his senior staff and several other soldiers who had come to witness what they expected to be an embarrassing failure. The shooting range had been set up to simulate real combat conditions, with targets positioned at various distances and angles throughout the rocky terrain surrounding the base. Staff Sergeant Petrov stood near a table covered with military equipment, his expression showing barely concealed amusement. "Good morning, little sniper," he said loud enough for the other soldiers to hear. "I hope you brought your lucky charms, because you will need all the help you can get today." Several soldiers chuckled at his comment, but Elena ignored the mockery and began setting up her equipment with methodical precision. She assembled her rifle, adjusted the scope settings for the current weather conditions, and performed a series of breathing exercises to center herself mentally. Sergeant Major Volgin approached with a clipboard containing the test parameters. "Listen carefully," he said in an official tone. "You will engage 5 targets in sequence. Target 1 is at 400 meters positioned behind partial cover. Target 2 is at 600 meters on elevated terrain. Target 3 is at 550 meters in a simulated urban environment with multiple obstacles. Target 4 is at 700 meters with crosswind conditions. Target 5 is at 800 meters, barely visible through natural camouflage." Elena nodded as she memorized each description, visualizing the challenges each shot would present. She had studied the terrain during her walk to the shooting position and had already begun calculating wind speed, humidity, and temperature variations that would affect her accuracy. "You will have exactly 60 seconds per target," Sergeant Major Volgin continued. "This includes target acquisition, range estimation, environmental calculation, and shot execution. If you exceed the time limit on any target, that attempt will be recorded as a miss. You will fire 1 shot per target with no opportunity for adjustment or correction." Lieutenant Semenov stepped forward with additional information. "Each target represents an enemy sniper who has your unit pinned down and is actively shooting at your comrades. Missing any target would result in casualties among friendly forces. This is not a sporting competition. This is a simulation of life and death combat conditions." Elena continued her preparation routine, checking her rifle's zero and testing the smoothness of her bolt action. The soldiers around her continued making jokes and predictions about her inevitable failure, but she remained focused on her equipment and mental preparation. Captain Kozlov called for silence and signaled the beginning of the test. Target 1. 400 meters, partial cover behind rock formation. Your time starts now. Elena dropped into a prone shooting position and quickly acquired the target through her scope. The fog made visibility challenging, but she could clearly see the silhouette representing an enemy sniper positioned behind a large boulder. She calculated the wind drift, adjusted for the slight upward angle, and controlled her breathing to find her natural respiratory pause. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. Through her scope, Elena saw the target's head area snap backward as her bullet found its mark with perfect precision. Several soldiers murmured in surprise, but Elena was already preparing for the second target. "Target eliminated," called the spotter who was observing through high-powered binoculars. Clean headshot, perfect center mass. Time, 30 to 8 seconds. Staff Sergeant Petrov's confident expression flickered slightly, but he maintained his mocking tone. "Lucky first shot. Let us see how she handles the real challenges." Target 2, Captain Kozlov announced. 600 meters, elevated position on the ridge. Time starts now. The second target was positioned on a steep hillside, requiring Elena to adjust for both distance and significant elevation changes. The morning fog was beginning to clear, but shifting wind patterns made the shot more complex. Elena studied the target area, noting the way grass and small bushes moved in the breeze to judge wind direction and speed. She adjusted her scope elevation and windage, took careful aim, and fired. The bullet traveled through the morning air with deadly accuracy, striking the target precisely in the head area, despite the challenging conditions. Target eliminated, the spotter confirmed. Another perfect headshot. Time, 42 seconds. The joking and laughter among the watching soldiers had stopped completely. They began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary, and their casual dismissal was transforming into focused attention. Sergeant Major Volgin frowned as he made notes on his clipboard. 2 lucky shots do not make a sniper. The remaining targets are much more difficult. Target 3, Captain Kozlov called out. 550 meters urban simulation with multiple obstacles. Time starts now. The third target was the most complex yet, positioned in a mock urban environment with walls, windows, and various obstructions that created multiple shadows and visual distractions. The target was only partially visible through a narrow gap between two concrete barriers, requiring perfect precision to avoid hitting the surrounding structures. Elena studied the scene carefully, identifying the exact location where the enemy sniper's head would be vulnerable. The shot required threading the bullet through a space barely larger than a dinner plate, with no margin for error. She calculated the precise angle needed and adjusted her aim accordingly. Her rifle cracked again, and the bullet flew through the narrow gap with millimeter precision, striking the target exactly where she had intended. The watching soldiers stood in stunned silence, beginning to understand that they were observing a level of marksmanship that few people could achieve. "Target eliminated," the spotter announced, his voice now showing genuine respect. "Perfect shot through the gap. Direct headshot. Time, 45 seconds. Lieutenant Semenov stepped closer to Captain Kozlov, speaking in a low voice. "Sir, this is incredible shooting. I have never seen anyone make these shots so consistently under these conditions." Staff Sergeant Petrov remained defiant, though his earlier confidence was clearly shaken. 2 more targets to go. The longest shots are still ahead, and those are where real skill shows. "Target 4, Captain Kozlov announced. 700 meters with strong crosswind conditions. Time starts now." The 4th target presented the greatest wind challenge of the test. A steady crosswind was blowing from the east at approximately 15 miles per hour, strong enough to push a bullet significantly off target if not properly calculated. Elena could see grass and small trees bending in the wind, and she used these visual cues to estimate the exact wind speed and direction. She made substantial windage adjustments to her scope, compensating for the bullet's expected drift during its flight time. The mathematics involved in calculating wind drift at this distance required split-second mental computation of multiple variables, including bullet weight, velocity, and aerodynamic characteristics. Elena fired her 4th shot, and despite the challenging conditions, the bullet curved through the air and struck the target with the same devastating precision as her previous shots. "Target eliminated," the spotter called out, his voice now filled with amazement. "Perfect headshot despite strong crosswind conditions. Time, 51 seconds." And the assembled soldiers no longer showed any trace of mockery or skepticism. They watched Elena prepare for her final shot with the focused attention of professionals who recognized exceptional skill when they saw it. Captain Kozlov felt a mixture of emotions as he prepared to announce the final target. His unit needed this kind of marksmanship capability, but accepting Elena would require him to challenge long-standing traditions and protocols. Staff Sergeant Petrov made one last attempt to maintain his position. "The final target is 800 meters through camouflage. That is an impossible shot under these conditions. No one can consistently hit targets at that range." Elena remained focused on her rifle, making small adjustments to her scope settings and preparing mentally for the most challenging shot of the test. 800 meters was at the extreme range of her rifle's effective capability, and the target was specifically designed to be nearly invisible against its natural background. "Target 5, Captain Kozlov announced. 800 meters, natural camouflage, minimal visibility. This is your final shot. Time starts now." Elena searched through her scope for several seconds before locating the target. It was positioned among trees and rocks with camouflage netting that made it blend almost perfectly with the surrounding environment. Only a small portion of the silhouette was visible, and that only from specific angles. She calculated the extreme range, factoring in bullet drop, wind drift, and the reduced velocity of her bullet after traveling such a distance. The shot required her to aim significantly high and to the side to compensate for all the environmental factors affecting the bullet's path. Elena controlled her breathing, found her natural respiratory pause, and squeezed the trigger with smooth, steady pressure. The rifle fired, and she immediately knew from the feel of the shot that her calculations had been correct. 800 meters away, the bullet struck the barely visible target with the same precision she had demonstrated on all the previous shots. Through her scope, Elena could see the unmistakable impact in the exact center of the target's head area. "Target eliminated," the spotter announced, his voice barely above a whisper. "Perfect headshot at 800 meters through camouflage. Time, 57 seconds." Complete silence fell over the shooting range. Every person present understood they had just witnessed something extraordinary. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits, all under challenging conditions that would test even experienced military snipers. Captain Kozlov stared at Elena as she carefully secured her rifle and began packing her equipment. In 20 years of military service, he had never seen such consistent accuracy under pressure. His unit's current marksmen were skilled soldiers, but none of them could have duplicated what Elena had just accomplished. Staff Sergeant Petrov stood frozen in place, his earlier mockery replaced by stunned disbelief. The woman he had dismissed as a delusional civilian had just demonstrated marksmanship skills that exceeded anything he had seen in his military career. Sergeant Major Volgin approached Elena with obvious respect in his manner. "That was exceptional shooting," he said formally. "I must apologize for our earlier skepticism. Your abilities are clearly far beyond what any of us expected." Elena finished packing her equipment and stood up, her expression remaining calm and professional. "Thank you, Sergeant Major. I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate my capabilities." Lieutenant Semenov shook his head in amazement. 5 perfect shots under combat conditions. I have never seen anything like that level of consistency and precision. The other soldiers who had gathered to watch began approaching Elena with questions about her equipment, her training, and her techniques. The atmosphere had completely transformed from mockery to genuine professional interest and respect. Captain Kozlov made his decision quickly and decisively. "Elena Volkov," he said in an official tone, "I am offering you the opportunity to join this unit as a specialist sniper. Your demonstrated abilities exceed our current capabilities, and we need someone with your skills for upcoming operations." Elena nodded once, her green eyes steady and confident. "I accept your offer, Captain. When do we begin?" Staff Sergeant Petrov finally found his voice, though his earlier arrogance had been completely replaced by grudging respect. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was wrong to judge your abilities based on assumptions and prejudices. You have clearly earned your place here through exceptional skill and dedication." Elena looked at him calmly. "Apology accepted, Sergeant. I understand your concerns were based on professional standards and unit cohesion. I hope to prove that I can contribute effectively to the team's success." As the soldiers began dispersing, discussing what they had just witnessed, Elena felt a quiet satisfaction. She had spent years preparing for this opportunity, and her grandfather's teachings had guided her to this moment of recognition. Tomorrow, she would begin the next phase of her journey, working alongside these soldiers to bring her unique skills to bear in real combat situations. The mountains had taught her patience, precision, and perseverance. Now it was time to use those lessons in service of something larger than herself, proving once and for all that skill and determination matter more than gender, background, or traditional expectations. 3 weeks after Elena joined Captain Kozlov's unit, intelligence reports indicated that a notorious enemy sniper known as the Ghost had taken position in the mountains overlooking a strategic supply route. This sniper had been terrorizing military convoys for months, killing 17 soldiers with long-range precision shots before disappearing into the rocky terrain like smoke. Elena sat in the briefing room with the rest of the unit, studying photographs and maps that showed the area where the Ghost was believed to be operating. The landscape was brutal, jagged peaks, deep ravines, and countless hiding spots that provided perfect concealment for a skilled marksman. "The Ghost has disrupted 6 convoys in the past month," Captain Kozlov explained, pointing to marked locations on the tactical map. "Each attack follows the same pattern: single shots from extreme range, then immediate withdrawal before our forces can respond. Our counter-sniper teams have been unsuccessful in locating or engaging this target." Staff Sergeant Petrov, who had become one of Elena's strongest supporters after witnessing her abilities, studied the attack patterns carefully. The shooting positions suggest someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain. The Ghost is choosing locations that provide maximum concealment and multiple escape routes. Sergeant Major Volgin added his analysis. Intelligence estimates the Ghost is using a high-powered rifle with advanced optics, possibly military-grade equipment. The confirmed kills were made at distances ranging from 600 to over 1,000 meters. Elena examined the photographs of the attack sites, noting the angles and sightlines that the Ghost had exploited. Her experience in these mountains gave her insights that the other soldiers lacked. allowing her to think like both hunter and hunted. "Captain," she said quietly, "I believe I can locate the ghost's primary hide site." The attack pattern shows a preference for elevated positions with northern exposure, which provides the best lighting conditions for long-range shooting in this region. There are only 3 locations in the operational area that meet these criteria and offer the necessary escape routes. Lieutenant Semenov looked skeptical. "Elena, this sniper has evaded our best tracking teams for months. What makes you think you can succeed where others have failed?" Elena pointed to specific locations on the map. "The ghost is thinking like a sniper, but not like someone who grew up in these mountains. Each attack position is tactically sound but follows predictable patterns. A local hunter would vary their approach more randomly." Captain Kozlov studied Elena's analysis with growing interest. "Explain your theory." "The ghost is highly skilled, but relies on standard military doctrine and advanced equipment rather than intimate terrain knowledge," Elena continued. "This creates predictable behavior patterns that someone familiar with local hunting traditions can anticipate." She traced potential routes on the map with her finger. If the ghost follows the same selection criteria for the next attack, the most likely position would be here, on the northwestern ridge overlooking the main supply route. It provides the ideal combination of range, concealment, and withdrawal options that this sniper has preferred in previous engagements. Sergeant Major Volgan examined Elena's reasoning carefully. "That position is over 1,200 meters from the road. Even if you are correct about the location, engaging a target at that range would be extremely difficult." Elena had already considered this challenge. 1,200 meters is at the extreme limit of effective range for most sniper systems, but it is achievable under the right conditions. The key factors will be weather, wind patterns, and precise range calculation. Captain Kozlov made his decision quickly. "Tomorrow morning, Elena will take position to counter-snipe the ghost. The rest of the unit will provide overwatch and support, but this will be primarily a one-on-one engagement between our best marksmen and theirs." Staff Sergeant Petrov raised a concern. "Captain, this puts enormous pressure on Elena. If the ghost strikes first, we could lose both our sniper and the convoy personnel." Elena understood the risks but felt confident in her preparation and abilities. "I appreciate the concern, Sergeant. However, I believe my knowledge of this terrain gives me a significant advantage. The ghost may be skilled, but this is my home territory." That evening, Elena spent hours studying detailed topographical maps and weather forecasts for the target area. She calculated bullet trajectories for various distances and wind conditions, preparing for multiple scenarios depending on exactly where the ghost might position himself. She also performed maintenance on her rifle, ensuring that every component was functioning at peak performance. At extreme ranges, even tiny mechanical variations could affect accuracy enough to mean the difference between success and failure. The following morning, Elena and a small support team moved into position before dawn. They established their hide site on a rocky outcrop that provided clear sight lines to the 3 locations Elena had identified as the ghost's most likely shooting positions. Through her high-powered scope, Elena methodically searched each potential hide site, looking for any sign of enemy presence. The morning fog provided additional concealment for both snipers, but Elena's familiarity with the terrain allowed her to identify subtle variations in shadow and texture that might indicate artificial camouflage. At approximately 10:30 in the morning, a military convoy consisting of 3 supply trucks and 2 escort vehicles began moving along the mountain road that had been the target of previous attacks. Elena knew that if the ghost was in position, he would begin target acquisition as soon as the vehicles came into range. She continued scanning the northwestern ridge through her scope, using techniques her grandfather had taught her for spotting well-concealed game. Rather than looking for obvious signs, she searched for tiny inconsistencies. Shadows that fell at wrong angles, vegetation that moved differently from its surroundings, or reflections that did not belong in the natural environment. Suddenly, Elena detected a brief flash of reflected light from the exact location she had predicted. The reflection lasted only a fraction of a second, but it was enough to confirm that someone with optical equipment was positioned on the ridge. "Contact," she whispered into her radio. "Target acquired at 1,230 meters, northwestern ridge, behind large boulder formation." Through her scope, Elena could barely make out the outline of a camouflaged shooting position. The ghost had chosen an excellent hide site with natural rock cover and carefully positioned camouflage netting. Only someone who knew exactly where to look would be able to detect the position. Elena began her calculations for the extreme range shot. 1,230 meters was beyond the distance she had ever attempted in combat conditions. The bullet would take approximately 1.5 seconds to reach the target, during which time wind, gravity, and atmospheric conditions would all affect its path. She observed wind indicators throughout the valley grass movement, dust patterns, and the way morning mist drifted across the landscape. The wind was variable, shifting between 5 and 10 miles per hour from the southwest, which would push her bullet to the right and slightly low. Elena made precise adjustments to her scope settings, compensating for the extreme range and environmental conditions. She controlled her breathing and found her natural respiratory pause, placing the crosshairs slightly high and to the left of where she could barely see the ghost's position. At that moment, she saw the ghost's rifle barrel emerge from the camouflaged position, aimed toward the approaching convoy. Elena knew she had only seconds before the ghost would fire on the unsuspecting soldiers below. Without hesitation, Elena squeezed her trigger with smooth, steady pressure. Her rifle fired, and she watched through her scope as the bullet began its long journey across the mountain valley. 1.5 seconds later, Elena saw the ghost's position suddenly shift as her bullet found its mark. Through her high-powered optics, she could see that her shot had struck exactly where she had aimed, eliminating the threat with a single perfectly placed round. "Target neutralized," Elena reported calmly into her radio. "The ghost is down." The convoy continued safely along its route, completely unaware of how close they had come to becoming casualties of the mountain sniper who had terrorized these roads for months. Captain Kozlov's voice crackled through Elena's earpiece. "Confirmed kill at 1,230 meters. Outstanding work, Elena. That was an exceptional shot, under extremely difficult conditions." Elena carefully secured her rifle and began preparing to move from her position. "Thank you, Captain. The threat to our supply routes has been eliminated." As news of Elena's success spread through the unit, the soldiers who had initially mocked her began to understand the true significance of what she had accomplished. Not only had she proven her worth as a marksman, but she had solved a problem that had plagued military operations in the region for months. Staff Sergeant Petrov approached Elena as she returned to base, his expression showing deep respect and admiration. "Elena, that shot will become legendary among snipers. 1,230 meters in variable wind conditions, against a target you could barely see, that requires skill that very few people possess." Sergeant Major Volgin nodded in agreement. "I have worked with some of the best marksmen in our military, and I have never seen anyone make a shot like that. Your grandfather would be proud of what you have accomplished." Elena felt a quiet satisfaction at having proven her capabilities in real combat conditions. However, she remained focused on the practical implications of her success rather than dwelling on personal recognition. "The important thing is that our soldiers can now use this supply route safely," she said simply. "The ghost was a significant threat to our operations, and eliminating that threat improves security for everyone in this region." Lieutenant Semenov had been monitoring radio communications and brought additional news. "Elena, intelligence reports indicate that enemy forces in this area are already showing signs of reduced morale and increased caution. Word of the ghost's elimination is spreading, and it is having a psychological impact beyond just removing one sniper." Captain Kozlov gathered the unit for a formal debrief, but the atmosphere was completely different from Elena's first day with the team. Instead of skepticism and mockery, she now faced genuine respect and professional admiration from soldiers who understood exactly what she had achieved. "Today's mission demonstrates the value of bringing exceptional talent into our unit, regardless of where that talent comes from," Captain Kozlov announced. "Elena has proven that skill, dedication, and intimate knowledge of the operational environment can overcome any conventional disadvantages." Over the following weeks, Elena's reputation spread throughout the military community. Other units began requesting her assistance with particularly challenging sniper problems, and her techniques became subjects of study in tactical training programs. Elena remained humble about her success, understanding that her abilities came from years of patient practice and the wisdom passed down from her grandfather. She continued to serve with Captain Kozlov's unit, providing her unique combination of mountain knowledge and exceptional marksmanship to support military operations in the region. The soldiers who had once laughed at the idea of a woman joining their elite unit now considered Elena one of their most valuable assets. Her proven ability to deliver results under the most challenging conditions had earned her a permanent place among warriors who valued effectiveness above all other considerations. More importantly, Elena's success had opened doors for other women who possessed exceptional skills but had been denied opportunities due to traditional prejudices. Her example showed that military effectiveness depended on individual capability, rather than gender, background, or conventional expectations. As Elena cleaned her rifle that evening, she thought about her grandfather's teachings and the long journey that had brought her to this point. The old hunter had been right. Patience, breathing, and understanding the rhythm of her own heartbeat had been the keys to success. But he had also taught her something even more valuable: the determination to prove herself through action rather than words, and the confidence to trust her abilities even when others doubted them. The mountains had made her into a sniper, but her own courage and persistence had made her into a soldier worthy of respect from the finest warriors her country had to offer. In the end, that combination of skill and character had proven more powerful than any weapon she could carry.